In 1997, the Brennan family set out on what should have been a simple weekend hiking trip in the Appalachian Mountains of Virginia. Michael, Sarah, and their two children, 12-year-old Emma and 8-year-old Tyler, never returned. No bodies were ever found. No evidence of what happened to them surfaced for over 2 decades. But in 2022, a massive landslide would tear open the mountain itself, revealing something that would shatter everything investigators thought they knew about the case. And the truth waiting in those woods was far more disturbing than anyone could have imagined. If you're fascinated by real mysteries that defy explanation, subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss a story that will keep you up at night. The photograph had yellowed at the edges, but the smiles remained bright. Devin Brennan held it carefully between his fingers, studying the faces of his family as they stood in the driveway of their Roanoke home on that October morning in 1997. His father, Michael, wore his favorite flannel shirt and hiking boots, one arm around Devin's mother, Sarah, who was laughing at something someone had said. Emma stood in front, her new backpack almost as big as she was, while Tyler clutched a pair of binoculars he'd gotten for his birthday. Devin remembered taking this picture. He'd been 19, home from his first semester at Virginia Tech for fall break. He was supposed to go on the hiking trip with them, but he'd backed out at the last minute to attend a party with friends from high school. The guilt of that decision had colored every day of the 25 years since. He set the photograph down on the worn oak table in what had been his parents' living room. The house still belonged to him now, though he rarely visited. Too many ghosts, too many unanswered questions hanging in the air like dust motes in the afternoon light. His phone buzzed in his pocket. The screen showed a Virginia number he didn't recognize. Devin almost sent it to voicemail, but something made him answer. "Is this Devin Brennan?" The voice was professional, measured. "Yes. Who's calling?" "Mr. Brennan, this is Detective Linda Harris with the Virginia State Police. I'm calling about your family's case. We've had a significant development, and I need you to come to the Shenandoah County Sheriff's Office as soon as possible." Devin's hand tightened on the phone. He'd received calls like this before, over the years, reported sightings that led nowhere, false leads from attention seekers. Each time, the hope had been a little dimmer, the disappointment a little more familiar. "What kind of development?" he asked, trying to keep his voice steady. There was a pause on the other end. "I'd prefer to discuss this in person, Mr. Brennan, but I can tell you this much. 3 days ago, there was a major landslide in the Massanutten Mountain area. The slide exposed something we believe is connected to your family's disappearance. We need you to help us with identification." Devin closed his eyes. After 25 years, the mountain was finally giving up its secrets. "I can be there in 2 hours," he said. The Shenandoah County Sheriff's Office sat at the edge of a small town that time seemed to have forgotten, its brick facade weathered by decades of mountain winters. Devin pulled into the parking lot exactly 2 hours and 7 minutes after Detective Harris's call, his hands still gripping the steering wheel long after he'd turned off the engine. Through the glass doors, he could see a woman in her mid-40s standing in the lobby, watching for him. She had short dark hair and wore a navy blazer that marked her as law enforcement, even from a distance. When Devin entered, she extended her hand with a firm grip. "Mr. Brennan, thank you for coming so quickly. I'm Detective Linda Harris." Her eyes were kind but carried the weight of someone who had seen too much. "I know this must be difficult. Please, come with me." She led him through a maze of corridors to a small conference room. The walls were painted an institutional beige, and a single window looked out over a parking lot where patrol cars sat in neat rows. On the table lay several manila folders and what appeared to be evidence bags. "Can I get you coffee? Water?" Detective Harris asked as she gestured for him to sit. "I'm fine." Devin remained standing, his eyes fixed on the evidence bags. "What did you find?" Detective Harris settled into a chair and opened one of the folders. "As I mentioned on the phone, We had a significant landslide on the eastern face of Massanutten Mountain 3 days ago. It's an area that was part of the original search zone back in 1997, but the terrain made it nearly impossible to search thoroughly at the time. The slide removed approximately 40 feet of soil and rock from a steep ravine. She pulled out several photographs and laid them on the table. Devin moved closer, his heart pounding. The images showed a chaotic scene of displaced earth and broken trees, but among the debris, partially buried in mud, were the unmistakable remains of what had once been a campsite. A torn piece of blue fabric, the twisted frame of a backpack, and most chillingly, a small hiking boot, its laces still tied. "We've recovered multiple items," Detective Harris continued, her voice gentle. "Camping equipment, personal effects, clothing. The condition varies, but some items are remarkably well preserved due to the way they were buried. We need you to look at what we've found and tell us if you recognize anything as belonging to your family." Devin lowered himself into a chair, his legs suddenly unsteady. "You found remains? Human remains?" "Not yet," Detective Harris said carefully, "but we haven't finished excavating the site. The area is unstable, and we're proceeding slowly. What we've recovered so far was in the immediate debris field." She paused. "Mr. Brennan, I need to prepare you for what we might find. After 25 years, if there are remains, they may be difficult to identify visually. We'll rely on forensics, DNA analysis." Devin nodded, though he wasn't sure he truly heard her. His attention had fixed on one of the photographs, a close-up of a small object half buried in mud. Even through the dirt, he could make out the faded pink plastic of a children's toy camera. "Emma's," he whispered. "That's Emma's camera. She brought it on every trip. Drove my dad crazy taking pictures of rocks and trees." Detective Harris made a note in her folder. "That's very helpful. I need you to look through these evidence bags and tell me what else you recognize." For the next hour, Devin examined item after item. His father's distinctive red canteen with the dent on one side. His mother's silver compass that had belonged to her grandfather. Tyler's binoculars, the lenses cracked but still recognizable. Each object was a knife to the heart, a tangible piece of the life that had been stolen from them. "Where exactly was this found?" Devin asked finally, pushing away an evidence bag containing what might have been his mother's jacket. "My parents were experienced hikers. They knew those trails. The search teams covered the main routes thoroughly." Detective Harris pulled out a topographic map marked with colored annotations. "This is where the landslide occurred." She pointed to a spot on the eastern face of the mountain, well off any marked trail. "It's approximately 2 miles from where their car was found at the trailhead parking area, but in the opposite direction from where they'd told park rangers they planned to hike." "That doesn't make sense," Devin said, leaning over the map. "They were supposed to do the Ridge Loop Trail. It's clearly marked, easy for kids. This area." He traced the contour lines with his finger. "This is rough terrain. Why would they have gone this way?" "That's one of the questions we're trying to answer," Detective Harris replied. "We've pulled the original case files, and I've been reviewing the investigation from 1997. I have to tell you, Mr. Brennan, there are some aspects of this case that troubled the original investigators, and they trouble me even more now." She opened another folder and pulled out a photocopy of a handwritten report. "This is from the initial search. Your family's car was found unlocked at the trailhead on October 14th, 3 days after they were expected to return. The car contained your mother's purse with her wallet and identification, but your father's wallet was missing. The keys were in the ignition. None of their provisions were in the vehicle, which suggested they'd taken everything with them." "I remember," Devin said quietly. "The rangers said it looked like they'd just stepped out for a hike and never came back." "What's strange," Detective Harris continued, "is what the search teams found on the trail itself. Or rather, what they didn't find. The Ridge Loop Trail is well maintained, and it was early October, so there would have been other hikers using it. But no one reported seeing your family. Not a single person. The search teams found no physical evidence that they'd used that trail at all. No dropped items, No footprints in the soft areas. Nothing. Devin frowned. But where else would they have gone? That's what we're trying to determine. The recovery site suggests they went off trail almost immediately, heading into remote backcountry. The question is why? She pulled out another photograph, this one older, from the original investigation. It showed the parking area where his family's car had been found. There's something else. The rangers who found the vehicle noted that it appeared to have been wiped clean. Not just normal clean, but spotless. No fingerprints on the door handles, the steering wheel, anywhere. A chill ran down Devin's spine. Someone cleaned the car? It's possible your parents did it themselves, though it would be unusual, Detective Harris said. But combined with everything else, it raises questions. She met his eyes directly. Mr. Brennan, I'm going to be frank with you. The original investigators suspected foul play, but they had no evidence and no suspects. The case eventually went cold. But now, with this discovery, we have a chance to finally get answers. What happens next? Devin asked. We continue the excavation, carefully and methodically. We bring in forensic anthropologists, cadaver dogs, ground-penetrating radar. We process every piece of evidence using techniques that didn't exist in 1997. And I'd like your help. Anything, Devin said immediately. Whatever you need. Detective Harris nodded. I want you to tell me everything you remember about the days before they left. Any unusual behavior, conversations, changes in plans. Sometimes family members notice things that didn't seem important at the time, but take on new meaning in hindsight. Devin closed his eyes, forcing himself back to that October week 25 years ago. He'd been home from college for less than a day when his parents had started preparing for the trip. His mother had been excited, he remembered, talking about the fall colors and how perfect the weather was supposed to be. His father had been more subdued than usual, but Devin had attributed that to work stress. Michael Brennan had been an accountant for a manufacturing company, and it had been the busy season. Wait, Devin said suddenly, his eyes opening. There was something. The night before they left, my parents had an argument. I was in my room, but I could hear them through the wall. My mother was upset about something, and my father kept saying they had to go, that it was important. I didn't think much of it at the time because they rarely argued, and when they did, it was usually about minor things. Do you remember what was said exactly? Devin shook his head. Only fragments. My mother said something like, not with the children, and my father said, we don't have a choice. I assumed they were talking about whether to bring Emma and Tyler on the hike. Maybe my mom thought they were too young for a difficult trail. He paused. But now, thinking about it, that doesn't make sense. They'd taken the kids hiking dozens of times. Detective Harris was writing rapidly in her notebook. This is important, Mr. Brennan. Is there anything else? Any visitors to the house? Phone calls? There was a phone call, Devin said slowly, the memory surfacing. The morning they left, I was loading their gear into the car when the phone rang. My father answered it in the house. He was on the phone for maybe 10 minutes, and when he came out, he looked worried. My mother asked him who it was, and he said it was just work. But you didn't believe him. I didn't think about it one way or the other at the time, Devin admitted. But looking back, my dad wouldn't normally take a work call on a Saturday morning, especially when we were about to leave for a trip. Detective Harris made another note. We'll pull phone records from your parents' house line, see if we can trace that call. She gathered the folders together. Mr. Brennan, I want you to prepare yourself for what we might find at the excavation site. After 25 years, the answers may not bring you peace. I've lived without answers for 2.5 decades, Devin said, his voice steady despite the emotions churning inside him. Whatever the truth is, I need to know it. As he left the sheriff's office, the October sun was sinking toward the mountains, casting long shadows across the parking lot. Devin stood beside his car, looking west toward the dark ridge of Massanutten Mountain. Somewhere up there, buried under decades of earth and stone, his family had been waiting, and now, finally, they were ready to tell their story. The excavation site was a wound in the mountainside, raw earth exposed where the landslide had torn through layers of soil and stone. Devon stood at the edge of the yellow crime scene tape, watching as forensic technicians in white protective suits worked methodically through the debris field. It was early morning, 3 days after his meeting with Detective Harris, and the October air carried the sharp scent of disturbed earth and decaying leaves. "We're making progress," Detective Harris said, appearing at his elbow. She handed him a cup of coffee from a thermos. "Slow, but steady. We've established a grid pattern, and we're documenting everything." Devon accepted the coffee gratefully, wrapping his hands around the warm cup. He'd barely slept since that first meeting, his mind churning with questions and fragments of memory. He'd spent hours going through old family photographs, home videos, anything that might provide a clue to what had happened on that October day in 1997. "Have you found anything new?" he asked. Detective Harris's expression was carefully neutral. "We've recovered more personal items, another backpack, some cooking equipment, fragments of a tent." She paused. "And we found something else, something that doesn't fit with a simple hiking accident." She led him to a portable canopy that had been set up as a field laboratory. Inside, evidence bags were laid out on folding tables, each tagged and photographed. Detective Harris picked up one of the bags and held it up to the light. Inside was a length of rope, weathered and stained with age, but clearly cut with a sharp blade. The ends were frayed, but the cut itself was clean, deliberate. "This was found buried with the camping equipment," Detective Harris said. "It's climbing rope, the kind your father would have brought for safety on difficult terrain. But it's been cut in multiple places, not worn through or frayed naturally. Cut." Devon examined the rope through the plastic bag. "What does that mean?" "I don't know yet, but it suggests something went wrong up there, something that required cutting their safety equipment." She set the bag down and picked up another. This one contained fabric, blue and white, torn but recognizable as part of a child's jacket. "We're finding items scattered over a wider area than we initially thought. The landslide exposed the primary site, but we're discovering that debris extends further up the slope." "Someone moved their things?" Devon asked. "Or they were trying to move when something happened?" Detective Harris pulled out a printed satellite image. "We've been comparing current satellite imagery with what was available from the late 1990s. The terrain has changed significantly due to erosion and growth, but we can still make out certain features. There's something I want to show you." She pointed to an area marked with a red circle on the image. About a quarter-mile from the primary recovery site, there's what appears to be the remains of a structure. It's almost completely overgrown now, but the rectangular outline is visible from above. We're planning to investigate it tomorrow." Devon felt his pulse quicken. "What kind of structure?" "We don't know. It doesn't appear on any maps of the area, and there's no record of any buildings being authorized in that section of the park. It could be an old hunting cabin, a ranger station that was abandoned and forgotten, or something else entirely." "I want to come with you," Devon said immediately. Detective Harris studied him for a long moment. "This isn't a tourist hike, Mr. Brennan. The terrain is treacherous, and we don't know what we're going to find." "They're my family," Devon said quietly. "I should be there." Finally, Detective Harris nodded. "All right, but you follow our lead. And if I tell you to stay back, you stay back. Understood?" "Understood." They spent the rest of that day at the excavation site. Devon watched as the forensic team uncovered more fragments of his family's final camping trip. A pot, dented and rusted. A water bottle with a cartoon character that had been Tyler's favorite. Each item was a small piece of a puzzle that refused to come together into a coherent picture. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the disturbed earth, one of the technicians called out. Detective Harris moved quickly to where the woman was carefully brushing soil away from something pale emerging from the dirt. Devon started to follow, but Detective Harris held up a hand. "Stay there," she said firmly. He watched from a distance as the technician continued her careful excavation. The pale object became more defined, and Devon's stomach clenched as he realized what it was. Bone. Human bone. Detective Harris spent several minutes conferring with the technician and taking photographs before she returned to where Devon waited. "We've found remains," she said gently. "The forensic anthropologist will need to examine them to determine age and identity, but—" She paused. "They appear to be those of a child." The world tilted beneath Devon's feet. He'd known this was possible, had tried to prepare himself for it, but the reality was crushing. Emma, or Tyler, one of his siblings, buried here for 25 years while he'd gone on living, going to college, starting a career, never knowing. "How long before you know which one?" His voice sounded distant to his own ears. "DNA analysis will take several weeks, but there may be other identifying factors, dental records if the skull is intact." Detective Harris touched his arm lightly. "I'm sorry, Mr. Brennan. I know this isn't easy." "You said the remains appear to be those of a child," Devon said, forcing himself to focus. "What about my parents? Are there other remains?" "We're still searching. The landslide could have scattered remains over a wide area, or—" She trailed off. "Or what?" "Or not all of your family died at the same location." That night, Devon sat in his hotel room, unable to turn off the lights. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw that pale bone emerging from the dark earth. He'd called in sick to work, told them it was a family emergency. They didn't need to know that the emergency was 25 years old. His laptop was open on the bed, a search engine displaying results for Massanutten Mountain disappearances. Over the years, he'd done this search countless times, looking for any pattern, any other cases that might be connected to his family's vanishing. Tonight, he was looking with fresh eyes, searching for anything he might have missed. Most of the results were about his own family's case, news articles from 1997 and the anniversary pieces that occasionally ran. But buried deep in the search results, he found something he didn't remember seeing before. A blog post from an amateur true crime enthusiast dated 5 years ago. The title read, "The Hidden History of Massanutten, Disappearances and Deaths You've Never Heard About." Devon clicked on the link. The blog post was long and detailed, documenting a series of incidents in the Massanutten Mountain area going back to the 1960s. Most were hikers who had gotten lost and were later found, some injured but alive. But there were 3 cases that caught Devon's attention. In 1972, a college student named Patricia Vance had vanished while hiking alone. Her backpack was found near a trail, but Patricia herself was never seen again. In 1983, a couple, Robert and Jennifer Cole, disappeared during a camping trip. Their tent was found still set up with all their belongings inside, but no sign of the couple. In 1991, 6 years before his own family's disappearance, a teenage girl named Melissa Kramer had gone missing during a church youth group camping trip. The group had split up for a short hike, and Melissa had simply never returned. None of these cases had been solved. None of the missing people had ever been found. Devon read and reread the blog post, his mind racing. 4 separate disappearances over 25 years, all in the same general area of Massanutten Mountain. The blog author speculated about natural hazards, perhaps a series of hidden ravines or caves, but offered no real explanation. He copied the names into a document and sent it to Detective Harris's email with a brief note. Then he forced himself to try to sleep, knowing that tomorrow they would be hiking to the mysterious structure on the mountain, and he needed to be sharp. But sleep was a long time coming. When it finally arrived, it brought dreams of dark forests and voices calling from deep beneath the earth, begging to be found. The next morning dawned cold and clear, with frost coating the grass around Devon's hotel. He dressed in layers, as Detective Harris had instructed, and met her and 2 other officers in the parking lot of the sheriff's office. One was a young deputy named Torres, who would be accompanying them for security. The other was older, introduced as Forest Ranger Bill Hutchins, who knew the Massanutten backcountry better than anyone. "I remember when your family went missing," Hutchins said as they loaded gear into a Park Service vehicle. "I was part of the search team back in '97. We looked for weeks, covered every trail in the area." He shook his head. "Never understood why we didn't find anything. It's like they vanished into thin air." "Maybe they found something they weren't supposed to," Detective Harris said, securing her backpack. "Or someone found them." They drove as far as the access road would take them, then began the hike on foot. The morning was beautiful in the way that mountain autumns often are, the leaves brilliant gold and red against the deep blue sky. But Devon couldn't enjoy the scenery. Every step took him closer to answers he wasn't sure he wanted to hear. The terrain grew rougher as they climbed. They were moving through old-growth forest now, trees that had stood for centuries, their trunks thick and bark deeply furrowed. The undergrowth was dense, and more than once they had to use machetes to clear a path. "We're about a half-mile from the site," Ranger Hutchins said, checking his GPS unit. "The structure should be just ahead, through that stand of pines." They pushed through the evergreens and emerged into a small clearing. And there, almost invisible beneath decades of vines and fallen leaves, was the cabin. It was small, maybe 12 feet by 12 feet, built from rough-hewn logs that had weathered to a dark gray. The roof had partially collapsed, and the single window was just an empty frame now, the glass long gone. A wooden door hung askew on rusted hinges. "No one's been here in years," Deputy Torres observed. "Maybe decades." But Detective Harris was staring at something else. Beside the cabin, nearly hidden by overgrown brush, was a metal pipe extending from the ground. She approached it carefully, pulling away the vegetation. "That's a ventilation pipe," Ranger Hutchins said, "which means there's something underground." They all turned to look at the cabin with new understanding. It wasn't just a structure, it was an entrance. Detective Harris pulled a heavy-duty flashlight from her pack and approached the cabin door. The wood was swollen with moisture and age, and it took Torres's help to force it open. The hinges screamed in protest, and the door fell inward with a crash that sent birds scattering from the surrounding trees. The interior of the cabin was sparse and rotting. What remained of furniture had collapsed into piles of moldering wood. Leaves and debris covered the floor in a thick carpet. But it was clear this had once been someone's shelter, deliberately built and used for some purpose. "Look at this," Ranger Hutchins said, pointing to markings on the wall near the door. They were carved into the wood, deep and deliberate. Numbers and letters, some faded beyond recognition, but others still visible. PV 1972, RNJC 1983, MK 1991. Devon felt ice form in his chest. "Those are initials and dates. Patricia Vance, 1972. Robert and Jennifer Cole, 1983. Melissa Kramer, 1991. "The missing people from your blog post," Detective Harris said quietly. She photographed the carvings with her phone, then moved the flashlight beam along the wall. There were more markings, older ones worn almost smooth, and then, near the collapsed remains of what might have been a table, fresh enough that the wood was still pale beneath. MSETB 1997. Michael, Sarah, Emma, Tyler, Brennan. "My family was here," Devon whispered. "They were in this cabin." Detective Harris's expression was grim. "And they carved their initials just like the others. The question is whether they did it willingly or—" She stopped, but they all understood what she meant. "The ventilation pipe," Torres said, directing his flashlight toward the back corner of the cabin. "It comes up through here." They cleared away debris to reveal a section of floor that looked different from the rest. Newer boards, less weathered, though still covered in years of accumulated dirt and leaves. Detective Harris knelt and brushed away the grime, revealing what looked like a trap door with a heavy iron ring set into it. "We need to call this in," she said, standing and pulling out her radio. "Get a full forensic team up here, proper equipment." "Detective." Torres's voice was tight. He was pointing at something near the trap door, partially hidden by the collapsed furniture. They all moved closer. Half buried in the rotted wood and leaves was a small shoe. A child's hiking boot, its laces still tied in a double knot. Devin recognized it immediately. He'd taught Tyler to tie his shoes that way, loop and swoop, to keep them from coming undone on the trail. "Tyler's," he said, his voice cracking. "That's Tyler's boot." Detective Harris placed a hand on his shoulder. "Mr. Brennan, I need you to step outside, now. This is an active crime scene, and we need to preserve—" A sound cut through her words, faint, muffled, coming from beneath their feet. A rhythmic tapping, metal on metal, deliberate and insistent. They all froze, staring at the trap door. "That's not possible," Ranger Hutchins said. "There can't be anyone down there, not after 25 years. The tapping came again, 3 quick strikes, a pause, then 3 more. Deliberate, intentional, a signal. Torres drew his weapon, and Detective Harris did the same. "Everyone back," she ordered. "Torres, call for immediate backup. Hutchins, get Mr. Brennan to a safe distance." But Devin wasn't moving. He was staring at the trap door, his mind unable to process what his ears were telling him. Someone was alive down there. After 25 years, someone was alive. "We can't wait for backup," he said. "If someone's trapped down there." "Mr. Brennan, we don't know what's down there." Detective Harris's voice was firm. "This could be a trap or—" The tapping changed pattern. 3 strikes, then 2, then 1. Over and over. 3-2-1, 3-2-1. "That's Emma's signal," Devin said suddenly. "When we were kids we had a code. 3 knocks meant, 'I'm here,' 2 meant, 'I'm okay,' 1 meant, 'come find me.' She's telling someone to find her." Detective Harris's expression shifted. She holstered her weapon and grabbed the iron ring on the trap door. "Torres, keep your weapon ready. Hutchins, get on the radio and tell them we have a possible survivor situation. Mr. Brennan, stay behind me." She pulled on the ring. The trap door was heavy, the wood swollen and stuck, but with Torres's help, they hauled it open. A wave of stale, cold air rushed up from below, carrying with it the smell of earth and stone and something else, something organic and wrong. A ladder descended into darkness, the rungs made of iron and bolted to a stone wall. Detective Harris aimed her flashlight down into the opening, revealing a vertical shaft that dropped at least 20 feet before opening into what looked like a larger space. "Hello?" she called down. "This is the police. If someone is down there, identify yourself." Silence. Then, faintly, a voice. Female, hoarse from disuse, but unmistakably real. "Help us. Please, he's coming back." Devin's world tilted. That voice. He knew that voice, even after 25 years, even roughened by time and trauma. "Emma," he called down into the darkness. "Emma, is that you?" A pause that seemed to last forever. Then, "Devin? Devin, is that really you?" He was moving before anyone could stop him, grabbing the ladder and starting down. Detective Harris shouted something behind him, but he didn't care. His sister was alive. After 25 years, Emma was alive. The ladder was slick with moisture, and the descent seemed to take forever. His flashlight beam bounced off stone walls as he climbed down into the earth. The air grew colder with each rung, and the smell intensified, a nauseating mixture of decay and human waste and fear. His feet touched solid ground, and he found himself in a chamber carved out of the living rock. The space was roughly circular, maybe 15 feet across, with a ceiling just high enough to stand. And there, huddled against the far wall, illuminated by his flashlight beam, was a woman. She was thin to the point of emaciation, her hair long and matted, her clothes little more than rags. But her eyes, when they met his, were Emma's eyes. 12 years old the last time he'd seen her. Now 37 and broken by whatever hell she'd endured, but unmistakably his sister. "Emma," he breathed, taking a step toward her. "Don't come closer," she said sharply, pressing herself against the wall. "Not yet. You don't understand. He'll know. He always knows when someone new comes. Detective Harris was descending the ladder behind Devon, her flashlight adding more light to the chamber. As the space illuminated, Devon could see other details. A thin mattress on the floor, stained and rotting. A bucket in the corner. Scratch marks on the walls, hundreds of them, perhaps thousands, clustered especially thick near the base of the ladder. And bones, small bones, scattered in the corners of the chamber. "Who?" Detective Harris asked, her voice controlled but tight. "Who will know?" Emma's eyes were wild, darting to the walls, as if she could see through them. "The shepherd. That's what he calls himself. He tends his flock." She laughed, a sound that held no humor. "That's what he calls us, his flock." "Emma, where are Mom and Dad?" Devon asked, though part of him already knew the answer. "Where's Tyler?" Emma's face crumpled. "Tyler's gone. He's been gone for so long. Dad, too. He tried to fight, tried to get us out. And the shepherd—" She couldn't finish. "And your mother?" Detective Harris asked gently. "Sarah Brennan?" "The other room," Emma whispered. "He keeps her in the other room. She's not right anymore. 25 years down here, it broke something in her mind. She doesn't even know who I am most days." Torres had descended the ladder now, and Ranger Hutchins was coming down behind him. The chamber felt crowded, the walls pressing in. "Emma, we're going to get you out of here," Detective Harris said. "Both you and your mother. You're safe now." But Emma was shaking her head violently. No, you don't understand. The shepherd, he has keys. He can lock the doors, seal the passages. If he knows you're here, if he thinks his flock is escaping." She grabbed Devon's arm with surprising strength. "He'll come, and he'll bring the others." "What others?" Devon asked. Emma's eyes filled with tears. "His helpers. The ones who survived long enough that they forgot they were prey. The ones who help him hunt." She leaned closer, her voice dropping to a terrified whisper. "Some of them have been down here longer than I've been alive." Above them, from somewhere in the woods beyond the cabin, a sound echoed through the trees. A whistle, clear and sharp, followed by a pattern of shorter notes. A signal. Emma went rigid. "He's here. He knows. He always knows." Detective Harris was already on her radio. "All units, we have a hostage situation at the cabin location. Suspect is in the area and potentially armed. I need immediate backup and—" The radio crackled and died. She tried again, but only static answered. "He has a jammer," Emma said dully. "For phones, radios, anything electronic. It's how he keeps us from calling for help if we get near the surface. We're trapped now. Just like I've been trapped for 25 years. In the darkness beyond the chamber, somewhere in the maze of passages that Emma's words suggested, something moved. The sound of footsteps, slow and deliberate, echoing off stone wall. Detective Harris drew her weapon, positioning herself between the chamber entrance and Emma. Torres did the same, his flashlight beam cutting through the darkness of what appeared to be a passage leading deeper into the underground complex. "This is the police," Detective Harris called out. "Come out with your hands visible. You are surrounded." A soft chuckle echoed from the darkness. "Surrounded? Oh, my dear, I don't think you understand the situation at all. You're in my home now, my domain, and down here, I make the rules." The voice was getting closer. Devon could hear the footsteps more clearly now, accompanied by what sounded like something being dragged across stone. Emma had curled into a ball against the wall, her hands pressed over her ears. "Don't listen to him," she whispered. "Don't let him talk. That's how he gets inside your head." "Mr. Brennan, get your sister and move back toward the ladder," Detective Harris ordered. But even as she spoke, there was a grinding sound from above, and the square of daylight from the open trapdoor began to shrink. Someone was closing it. "Hutchins!" Torres shouted up the ladder. "Hutchins, keep that door open!" The daylight disappeared completely with a solid thunk, followed by the sound of something heavy being dragged across the trapdoor. They heard the ranger's muffled voice calling from above, then nothing. "Ah, yes, I should mention," the voice from the darkness said pleasantly. "My helpers are quite dedicated to their tasks. The door won't be opening again from the outside, not without the proper equipment, which I suspect will take your colleagues several hours to retrieve and bring all the way up the mountain. We have time to get properly acquainted." A figure emerged from the passage into the chamber, and Detective Harris's flashlight beam found him. He was tall, perhaps 6.5 feet, with a spare frame that spoke of wiry strength. His age was difficult to determine, somewhere between 50 and 70, his face deeply lined but his movements fluid and sure. He wore simple clothes, dark pants, and a wool sweater, both clean and well-maintained. In his right hand, he carried a long staff, polished smooth from years of use, and behind him, just visible in the shadows, other figures waited. "My name is Silas Garrett," he said, his voice warm and welcoming as if he were greeting guests at a dinner party, "though my flock knows me as the shepherd, and you've made quite an intrusion into my sanctum." "Silas Garrett," Detective Harris said, and Devon could hear the recognition in her voice. "You disappeared in 1969 after being released from a psychiatric facility in West Virginia. You were suspected in the deaths of 3 hikers near Seneca Rocks. But there was never enough evidence to charge you. Suspected, yes. Guilty, absolutely." Silas smiled, showing yellowed but intact teeth. "Those 3 were my first. So young, so trusting. They taught me valuable lessons about human nature, about how far people will go to survive and what they'll do when hope finally dies." He gestured around the chamber with his staff. "This place, this beautiful sanctuary, I found it by accident while running from your predecessors. A natural cave system, expanded over the years with patience and dedication, the perfect place to conduct my work." "Your work?" Torres asked, his weapon never wavering. "The study of the human soul under pressure," Silas said. "What we become when civilization is stripped away, when there's no rescue coming, no hope of escape. It's fascinating, really. Some people break in days, others take years. And a rare few," he glanced at Emma with something like pride, "they adapt, they survive, they become something new." "You're a serial killer," Detective Harris stated flatly. "Oh, I'm so much more than that, Detective. A serial killer simply destroys. I preserve. I transform. Everyone who has entered my care remains here in one form or another. Some join my helpers, like young Jacob here." He gestured to the shadows behind him, and a figure shuffled forward. The man who emerged was perhaps 40 years old, though it was hard to tell. His eyes were empty, his expression vacant. He moved with the mechanical precision of someone following orders their mind no longer questioned. "Jacob came to me in 1994, Silas explained. "He was a graduate student, camping alone, researching wildlife. Now he helps me maintain the passages, tend to the flock, and ensure that my work continues uninterrupted." "Let these people go," Detective Harris said. "Release them now, and we can talk about getting you proper help." "Help?" Silas laughed. "My dear detective, I don't need help. I'm performing valuable research. Every person who has come here has taught me something new about the limits of human endurance. Take young Emma, for instance. 25 years she's been here, and she still hasn't fully broken, still retains her sense of self. Remarkable, really." Devon couldn't stay silent any longer. "What did you do to my family?" Silas turned his attention to Devon, his expression thoughtful. "Ah, yes, the Brennans. A lovely family, so full of life and hope. Your father fought harder than most. When I first encountered them on the trail, I do like to walk the woods, you see, find those who have wandered off the beaten path." He recognized something was wrong almost immediately. Quite perceptive. He tried to get his family away, but my helpers are skilled at herding. "You murdered my father and brother," Devon said, his voice shaking with rage. "Your brother's death was unfortunate," Silas said with what seemed like genuine regret. He was only 8, too young to properly appreciate what I could teach him. He became hysterical, wouldn't eat, wouldn't sleep. Sometimes the young ones simply can't adapt. As for your father, well, he made his choice. He attacked Jacob during one of our sessions, tried to use a piece of broken pipe as a weapon. I couldn't allow that kind of violence in my sanctuary. It disturbs the others. Emma was sobbing now, the sounds tearing from her throat in ragged gasps. Devon moved to her, wrapping his arms around her trembling form. "And my mother?" he demanded. "What did you do to her?" "Sarah is special," Silas said softly. Her mind found a way to escape that even I couldn't have predicted. She's still here, still physically present, but mentally, she's somewhere far away, somewhere I can't reach. It's both frustrating and fascinating. Detective Harris had been subtly shifting her position, trying to get a clear shot, but Silas seemed to anticipate every movement. "Your weapon won't help you, Detective. Kill me, and my helpers will simply lock you all in here. They'll seal the passages, collapse the entrance, and you'll join my flock permanently. Shoot me, and you doom everyone in this chamber." "We have people outside," Detective Harris said. "They know where we are. They'll dig through that door." "Perhaps. But by the time they do, how many days will have passed? 3, 4? And how will you survive down here with no food, no water, no light once your batteries die?" Silas gestured to the darkness beyond the chamber. "These passages extend for miles, branching and twisting through the mountain. Without my guidance, you'll be lost in the dark, wandering until thirst and starvation take you." Devon felt Emma's hand grip his arm. She leaned close, her lips barely moving as she whispered in his ear. "There's another way out, the water passage. It floods when it rains, but there hasn't been rain in weeks. It's tight and dark, but it leads to a sinkhole on the western slope." Devon gave the slightest nod to show he'd heard. Silas was still talking, his voice taking on a lecturing tone. "You see, what I've learned over the decades is that humans are remarkably resilient, but also remarkably malleable. Given enough time, enough pressure, anyone can be reshaped. Even police officers, even devoted family members." He looked directly at Devon. "You, for instance. How long would it take before you do anything I asked, just for the promise of seeing the sun again?" "I'd die first," Devon said. "They all say that," Silas replied with a sad smile. "But they rarely mean it. Not when the reality sets in, not when the darkness becomes absolute." Detective Harris made her decision. "Torres, on my mark, light saturation and move." Before Silas could react, both officers activated the high-intensity beams on their flashlights and swung them directly at him and the figures behind him. The sudden glare in the darkness was blinding, and in that moment of confusion, Detective Harris fired 2 shots. Not at Silas, but at the ceiling of the passage behind him. The bullets struck ancient, water-weakened rock, and the effect was immediate. With a grinding roar, a section of the ceiling collapsed, tons of stone and earth crashing down, sealing the passage and cutting Silas off from his helpers. "Move!" Detective Harris shouted. "Emma, show us that water passage. Now!" Emma grabbed Devon's hand and pulled him toward a section of wall that looked solid, but, when she pressed it in a certain way, revealed a narrow opening. The others followed, squeezing through into a passage so tight they had to turn sideways. Behind them, they could hear Silas calling out, his voice no longer warm and friendly, but filled with cold rage. "You think you can escape? You think you know these passages better than I do? I've had 50 years to learn every inch of this mountain." The sound of digging began, rock scraping against rock. He was already working to clear the collapse. "Run!" Emma gasped. "Run now, or we'll never make it." They ran through the darkness, their flashlight beams bouncing off narrow stone walls that seemed to press closer with each step. The passage descended sharply, and soon they were splashing through shallow water that grew deeper as they progressed. "How far?" Detective Harris called to Emma. "Half a mile, maybe less, but it gets tight, really tight." The passage narrowed further until they were crawling on hands and knees through water that was now knee-deep. The ceiling dropped lower, forcing them onto their bellies, pulling themselves forward with their elbows while the water soaked through their clothes. Devon's flashlight beam caught something ahead. The passage ended in a pool of dark water, and above it, a gap between rock faces that looked barely wide enough for a person to squeeze through. "That's it," Emma said. "The sinkhole is on the other side, but you have to dive down and come up on the other side. If you panic in the middle, if you get stuck—" "I'll go first," Torres said. He handed his weapon to Detective Harris, took several deep breaths, and dove into the dark water. They waited, counting seconds that felt like hours. Then Torres's voice echoed from the other side. "It's clear. Come through." One by one, they made the dive. Detective Harris went next, then Emma, her skeletal frame just barely fitting through the gap. Devon was about to follow when he heard it. Footsteps, splashing through water, coming fast from the passage behind them. He dove without hesitation, the cold water shocking his system. The passage underwater was completely dark, and he had to feel his way along the rock, his lungs already burning. For a moment, he thought he was stuck, the passage too narrow. But then his fingers found open space, and he pulled himself through, kicking toward what he hoped was the surface. He broke into air, gasping, and hands grabbed him, hauling him up onto a rocky ledge. They were in a natural sinkhole, its walls steep but climbable, and far above, a circle of blessed daylight. "Where's Hutchins?" Devon asked, looking around. "Still at the cabin," Detective Harris said. "We need to get up there and make sure he's all right." They began the climb, using roots and rock ledges for handholds. It was slow going, especially for Emma in her weakened state. But they helped each other, inch by painstaking inch. They were halfway up when Emma suddenly went rigid. "Wait," she whispered. "Listen." From the water below, a voice echoed up the sinkhole walls. Silas had followed them. "You can't escape me," he called. "This is my mountain, my kingdom, and you've taken what belongs to me." They climbed faster, not looking back, until finally they pulled themselves over the lip of the sinkhole and into the blessed light of day. They were on the western slope, just as Emma had said, about a quarter mile from the cabin. "We need to get to Hutchins," Detective Harris said, "and we need to call for backup before—" The whistle came again, from multiple directions now. Silas's helpers, emerging from the forest, surrounding them. They weren't trapped underground anymore, but they were far from safe. The forest had become a maze of threats. Devon counted at least 4 distinct whistle patterns, each from a different direction, closing in on their position. The helpers were coordinating, herding them just as Silas had described. "How many?" Torres asked, his service weapon drawn and sweeping the tree line. "At least 6, Emma said, her voice hollow. "Maybe more. He rotates them. Some stay underground with the flock, others patrol the surface. They know these woods better than anyone." Detective Harris was already moving, positioning them with their backs to a large outcropping of rock. It wasn't ideal cover, but it was better than being exposed on all sides. She pulled out her radio, praying the jammer's range didn't extend this far from the cabin. "This is Detective Harris to any unit. Officer needs assistance, western slope of Massanutten, approximately 1/4 mile from the cabin site. Multiple suspects in the area. Hostage situation. Repeat, officer needs assistance." Only static answered. "The jammer has a range of about 1/2 mile, Emma said. "We need to get further away from the cabin." "We can't leave Hutchins," Torres said. A figure emerged from the trees to their left. It was a woman, perhaps 50 years old, wearing mismatched hiking clothes that looked like they'd been scavenged from multiple sources. Her face was blank, emotionless, as she walked toward them with the mechanical gait Devon had seen in Jacob underground. "Sarah?" Detective Harris called out. "Sarah Brennan?" Devon's heart clenched. Could this be his mother? But Emma shook her head. "That's not Mom. That's Patricia. Patricia Vance." She's been with the shepherd longer than any of the others, since 1972. The woman who had disappeared as a college student 50 years ago now stood before them, her humanity eroded by decades of captivity. She stopped about 20 yards away and simply stood there, watching them with empty eyes. "Patricia, my name is Detective Linda Harris. We're here to help you. You don't have to do what he says anymore." Patricia's head tilted slightly, like a bird studying something curious. Then she raised her hand and pointed at Emma. When she spoke, her voice was a rasping whisper. "Shepherd says the new lamb must return. The new lamb broke the rules. Must be punished." "I'm not going back," Emma said, her voice stronger than Devon had heard since they'd found her. "I'm never going back." More figures emerged from the trees. Jacob, whom they'd seen underground. A younger man, perhaps 30, with wild eyes and tangled hair. An older man with a pronounced limp, dragging one leg behind him. All of them moving in that same eerie, synchronized way, slowly tightening the circle. "We don't want to hurt you," Detective Harris called out. "But if you come closer, we will defend ourselves." The helpers showed no sign of hearing her. They continued their slow advance, step by methodical step. Torres fired a warning shot into the air. The crack of the gunshot echoed through the trees, and for a moment the helpers paused. But then they resumed their approach, unfazed. "They don't care if they die," Emma whispered. "The shepherd has convinced them that death is just another form of service. They're already dead inside. They just haven't stopped moving yet." Devon looked at his sister, seeing the horror of what she'd endured written in every line of her gaunt face. 25 years in that underground hell, watching others break and transform into these hollow shells. How had she survived with her mind intact? "Emma," he said quietly. "Where's Mom? You said she was in another room. Is she down there, or is she—" "She's here," Emma said. "On the surface. The shepherd moved her up about 5 years ago when her mind broke. He uses her as an example sometimes, brings new ones to see what happens when you stop fighting." She pointed toward the northeast. "There's another shelter, a smaller one, about 200 yards that way. That's where he keeps the broken ones." "Then that's where we're going," Devon said. "Mr. Brennan, we need to get to safety first," Detective Harris said. "We can't help your mother if we're dead or captured." "I'm not leaving without her." Devon's voice was firm. "You can go. Get Emma to safety, call for backup, but I'm finding my mother." The helpers were close now, less than 10 yards away. Detective Harris made a decision. "Torres, you and Emma head north, get beyond the jammer's range and call for backup. Mr. Brennan and I will retrieve his mother and meet you at the rendezvous point." "Detective, I can't leave you." "That's an order, Deputy. Get this woman to safety. She's evidence, and she's a survivor. The case depends on her testimony." Torres hesitated, but training won out. He grabbed Emma's arm and began pulling her away from the outcropping, moving quickly through the trees. 2 of the helpers turned to follow them, but Detective Harris fired again, this time aiming for the ground at their feet. "Your fight is with me," she called out. "Leave them alone." Patricia Vance moved closer, and now Devon could see her face more clearly. There was something in her eyes, not quite empty, a flicker of something human, buried deep. "Patricia," he said, stepping forward despite Detective Harris's warning gesture. "Your name is Patricia Vance. You were 21 years old when you disappeared. You were studying biology at the University of Virginia. Your parents never stopped looking for you." Something shifted in Patricia's expression, a crack in the blank facade. "Patricia Vance," he continued, "your father's name was George. Your mother was Elizabeth. You had a younger brother named Michael who—" "Stop." The word came from Patricia's lips, barely audible. "Stop. That person is dead." "She's not dead," Devon insisted. "She's right here. You're right here. And we can get you out. We can take you home." Tears began to stream down Patricia's weathered face, but her expression remained blank. "Home," she whispered. "No home, only the shepherd. only the flock. "He's a liar and a murderer," Detective Harris said, her weapon still trained on the approaching helpers. "Everything he's told you is a lie. The world is still out there. Your family is still out there." For a moment, Patricia seemed to waver. The other helpers had stopped their advance, as if waiting for her to make a decision. Jacob stood with his head cocked, watching her with those empty eyes. Then Silas's voice rang out from somewhere in the forest, amplified somehow, echoing off the trees. "My dear flock, the time has come to prove your devotion. Bring the new ones back to me. Bring them back, or you will all be punished." You know what punishment means. The effect on the helpers was immediate and terrible. Whatever small spark of humanity had flickered in Patricia's eyes died. The helpers resumed their advance, moving faster now, their faces twisted with a fear that seemed to override all other thought. "Run!" Detective Harris shouted. Devon and the detective sprinted toward the northeast, toward the shelter where Emma said their mother was being kept. Behind them, they could hear the helpers crashing through the underbrush, no longer slow and methodical, but driven by panic. The forest flew past in a blur of brown and gold. Devon's lungs burned, his legs pumping as branches whipped at his face. Detective Harris was ahead of him, her athletic training giving her an edge, but she kept looking back to make sure he was keeping up. They burst into a small clearing, and there it was. Another structure, even more decrepit than the cabin. It was barely standing, the walls sagging, the roof mostly collapsed. But smoke rose from a crude chimney, and through a gap in the wall, Devon could see movement inside. Detective Harris reached the door first and kicked it open. The interior was dim, lit only by a small fire burning in a makeshift hearth. The smell was overwhelming: unwashed bodies, human waste, sickness, and despair. And there, sitting on the floor near the fire, staring into the flames with vacant eyes, was Sarah Brennan. She looked ancient, though she was only 59 years old. Her hair was completely white, hanging in matted strands around her hollow face. She wore rags that might once have been clothing. Her hands were clasped in her lap, and she rocked slowly back and forth, humming a tuneless melody. "Mom," Devon breathed, taking a step toward her. Sarah didn't react. She continued rocking, humming, staring at the fire, as if she were completely alone. "Mrs. Brennan," Detective Harris said gently. "Sarah, we're here to help you. We're taking you home." Still, no response. Devon knelt beside his mother, reaching out to touch her shoulder. She flinched at the contact, but didn't look at him. "Mom, it's me. It's Devon. Your son. I've come to take you home." Sarah's humming stopped. For a long moment, she was completely still. Then, slowly, her head turned. Her eyes, clouded and distant, found his face. "Devon?" The word was barely a whisper, uncertain, as if she were trying out a word in a foreign language. "Yes, Mom. It's me. I'm here. Emma's safe. We're going to get you out of here." Something flickered in Sarah's eyes. Recognition, or just confusion. She reached up with a trembling hand and touched Devon's face, her fingers tracing his features like a blind person trying to see. "My boy," she whispered. "My baby boy. I thought you were dead. He said you were all dead." "I'm alive, Mom, and I'm taking you home." The sound of footsteps outside interrupted them. The helpers had caught up. Detective Harris positioned herself at the door, weapon ready. "We need to go," she said urgently. "Now." Devon helped his mother to her feet. She was so light, nothing but skin and bones. She couldn't walk on her own, so he lifted her in his arms, cradling her like a child. "The back wall," Sarah said suddenly, her voice gaining a strange clarity. "There's a gap behind the boxes. He doesn't know about it. I made it. Took me years. In case I needed to run." Detective Harris moved to where Sarah indicated and found what she'd described. A section of the wall that had been carefully loosened, creating an opening just large enough for a person to squeeze through. They pushed through into the forest beyond, emerging into dense undergrowth. Behind them, they heard the helpers entering the shelter, their footsteps thundering across the wooden floor. "This way," Sarah said, her lucidity flickering in and out. "Follow the stream. It leads to the old logging road. I used to walk it before everything." They ran through the forest, following the sound of running water. Sarah's directions were surprisingly accurate, guiding them around obstacles, through gaps in the dense vegetation. It was as if some part of her mind, even broken and traumatized, had been planning this escape for years. The sound of the stream grew louder, and then they were beside it, a narrow ribbon of water cutting through the rocks. They followed it downhill, moving as quickly as Devon could manage while carrying his mother. Behind them, the whistles started again, but this time there was something different in the sound. Urgency, desperation. The helpers were losing their prey, and Silas would punish them for failure. The stream led them to a dirt road, overgrown but still visible. And there, parked at the edge, was a Park Service vehicle. Ranger Hutchins stood beside it, holding his radio, his face bruised but alive. "Thank God," he said when he saw them. "I got free, got the door open, but you were gone. I've been calling for backup. They're on their way." In the distance, Devon could hear the blessed sound of sirens, growing closer. They'd made it. Against all odds, they'd made it out alive. The command center had been set up in the parking area at the base of Massanutten Mountain, a cluster of vehicles and emergency personnel that had grown throughout the day. Devon sat in the back of an ambulance, a blanket wrapped around his shoulders, watching as his mother was loaded into another ambulance for transport to the hospital. Emma had been taken away an hour earlier, surrounded by medical personnel and social workers. Detective Harris approached him, her own jacket torn and muddy from their escape through the forest. She carried 2 cups of coffee and handed one to Devon. "How are you holding up?" she asked. "I don't know," Devon admitted. "I should feel relieved. I found them. After 25 years, I found my mother and sister alive. But they're not the same people who disappeared," Detective Harris finished. "I know. Trauma changes people. What they've endured, what they've survived, it leaves marks that never fully heal." Devon sipped the coffee, barely tasting it. "What happens now?" "Now we mount a full operation to clear that underground complex and apprehend Silas Garrett and anyone helping him." She gestured to the staging area where tactical teams were gearing up. "We have enough personnel now to do this properly, and we have Emma's testimony, her knowledge of the layout. We're going to end this today. I want to go with you." Detective Harris shook her head. "Absolutely not. You're a civilian, and you've been through enough. Besides, your mother and sister need you at the hospital. They have doctors. They have nurses. What they don't have is someone who knows Silas's voice, his patterns." Devon set down his coffee and met her eyes. "Emma said he studies people, learns how they think." "Well, I've been studying him too, ever since I heard him speak in that chamber. I can help." Before Detective Harris could respond, Torres approached at a jog. "Detective, we've got a situation. The FBI just arrived and they want to take over the operation." "Of course they do," Detective Harris muttered. She turned back to Devon. "Stay here. I mean it." She strode away toward a cluster of vehicles where several people in FBI windbreakers were gathering. Devon watched for a moment, then quietly slipped away from the ambulance. The tactical staging area was organized chaos. Officers checking equipment, studying maps, coordinating radio frequencies. Devon spotted Ranger Hutchins standing near a topographic map spread across the hood of a vehicle. "Mr. Brennan," Hutchins said when he saw Devon, "you should be getting checked out by the medics." "I'm fine. I want to help with the operation." Hutchins studied him for a long moment. "You know we can't authorize that." "I know. But I also know you were part of the original search in 1997. You never forgave yourself for not finding them. This is your chance to finish what you started." The ranger's jaw tightened. What are you proposing? Emma told me about the water passage, but she also mentioned other routes, ventilation shafts, emergency exits that Silas built in case his main entrance was compromised. If I can find those, I can give your teams additional access points. And how exactly would you find them? Devon pulled out his phone and opened the notes he'd been making. I've been thinking about what Silas said. He found this cave system in 1969 and has been expanding it for over 50 years. That's a lot of digging, a lot of displaced earth and stone. Where did it all go? He couldn't have just piled it outside the cabin without someone noticing eventually. Hutchins leaned closer, interested despite himself. Go on, go. He had to disperse it somehow. Probably used the water system, let the streams carry away the smaller debris. But for larger excavations, he'd need other methods. And he'd need fresh air circulation for an underground complex that size. Devon pointed to the map. Emma said there were at least 6 chambers that she knew about, probably more in sections she'd never seen. That many chambers would need multiple ventilation points. We've been looking for obvious chimneys or pipes, Hutchins said slowly, but if he disguised them, look for the subtle signs, temperature differentials in the snow during winter, places where vegetation grows differently because of underground heat or moisture, areas where the ground sounds hollow when you walk on it. Hutchins pulled out his own phone and made a call. Bill, it's Hutchins. I need you to pull up the infrared aerial surveys we did of this area last winter. Yeah, the ones for the wildlife study. I'm looking for thermal anomalies. While Hutchins coordinated with his team, Devon studied the topographic map more closely. The terrain was complex, with numerous ravines and ridges, but there were patterns if you knew how to look for them. Silas had been moving through this area for decades, hunting, herding, maintaining his underground kingdom. He would have needed routes that kept him hidden, but allowed relatively easy access to the surface. Got something, Hutchins said, turning his phone so Devon could see. The infrared image showed the mountain in false colors, heat signatures rendered in reds and yellows against the cool blue and purple of the surrounding terrain. There were 3 distinct warm spots, 2 of them in locations they already knew about, the cabin and the shelter. But the third was deeper in the forest, almost a mile from the primary site. That could be another entrance, Devon said. Or it could be a natural thermal spring, Hutchins cautioned. But he was already marking the location on his map. Detective Harris returned, her expression grim. The FBI is bringing in their own teams. They want to wait until morning, bring in more resources, do a full tactical assessment. She looked at Hutchins. They're pulling rank. This isn't our operation anymore. Like hell it isn't, Hutchins said. Silas Garrett has been operating in my forest for 50 years. I'm not waiting another 12 hours while he has time to collapse his tunnels, destroy evidence, or kill any survivors we haven't found yet. Bill, you can't. I can, and I am. Hutchins gathered up his maps. I'm conducting a search and rescue operation for potential survivors. That's within my jurisdiction as a park ranger. If I happen to encounter suspects, well, that's just part of the job. Detective Harris looked at Devon, then back at Hutchins. A slow smile crossed her face. Well, I can't let you go into a potentially dangerous situation without police backup, officer safety protocols and all that. Appreciated, Detective. They assembled a small team, Hutchins, Detective Harris, Torres, and 2 other park rangers who knew the terrain. Devon argued his way into being included as a consultant, promising to stay back and not engage in any tactical situations. As the sun began its descent toward the horizon, casting long shadows across the mountain, they set out for the thermal anomaly Hutchins had identified. The FBI teams were still staging at the base, planning their elaborate operation for the morning. By the time they realized Hutchins's team had already moved, it would be too late to stop them. The hike took them through increasingly dense forest, following animal trails and game paths that Hutchins navigated with practiced ease. As they moved, Devon found himself thinking about Emma's description of Silas's helpers, the ones who had been broken and reformed into extensions of his will. How many people do you think he's taken over the years? Devon asked quietly as they walked. The blog post you found mentioned 4 disappearances, including your family, Detective Harris replied. But those are just the ones that were reported. How many solo hikers go missing and are never connected? How many transients, drifters, people with no one to report them gone? Dozens, Hutchins said from ahead of them. Maybe more. We find remains in these mountains every few years. Usually they're attributed to accidents, falls, exposure. But now, knowing what we know about Garrett. He didn't finish the thought. They reached the location of the thermal anomaly as the sun touched the tops of the western peaks. The spot looked unremarkable at first glance, just another section of dense forest. But as they spread out and searched, Torres found what they were looking for. Hidden beneath a carefully constructed pile of fallen logs and branches was a metal grate, about 3 feet square. Warm air rose from it, carrying that now familiar smell of earth and stone and something organic underneath. Another entrance, Detective Harris said. She pulled out her radio. This is Harris to base. We've located a secondary access point to the underground complex. Coordinates are... She rattled off the GPS numbers. The radio crackled. Detective Harris, this is FBI Special Agent Crawford. You are ordered to return to base immediately. Do not enter that access point. We have protocols. Detective Harris turned off her radio. Hutchins and one of the other rangers were already working to remove the grate. It was heavy, designed to keep out animals and casual hikers, but not to withstand a determined effort. With a final heave, they pulled it free, revealing a vertical shaft with metal rungs leading down into darkness. I'll go first, Hutchins said, clicking on his headlamp. Harris, you're second. Torres, you and the others maintain position here. If we're not back in 30 minutes, or if you hear gunfire, call in the FBI and anyone else you can get. Torres wanted to argue, but the look on Detective Harris's face stopped him. 30 minutes, he confirmed. Devon waited until Hutchins and Detective Harris had started down the shaft, then grabbed a rung and followed before anyone could stop him. Mr. Brennan, what the hell? Torres started, but Devon was already descending, his flashlight clamped between his teeth. The shaft went down about 40 feet before opening into a passage. This one was different from the others Devon had seen, more finished, with timber supports and what looked like electric lighting fixtures, though they weren't currently lit. Hutchins and Detective Harris were waiting at the bottom, and Hutchins's expression when he saw Devon was thunderous. I told you to stay topside, and I'm sure Torres will be very angry with me, Devon replied, but I'm here now, and we're wasting time arguing about it. Detective Harris sighed. Stay behind us. You see anything threatening, you run back up that ladder. Clear? Clear. They moved into the passage, their lights revealing a tunnel that extended in both directions. To the left, it seemed to slope downward. To the right, it remained level. Which way? Hutchins asked. Devon listened carefully. From the left, he could hear the faint sound of water dripping. From the right, nothing but silence. But there was something else. Something he felt more than heard. A vibration in the air, almost imperceptible, like the resonance of distant machinery. Right, he said. Something's running that way. Power generation, maybe. If Silas has been down here for 50 years, he'd need power for lights, ventilation. They moved right, weapons drawn, flashlights cutting through the darkness. The passage continued for several hundred feet before opening into a larger chamber. And there, in the center of the room, was what Silas Garrett had built over half a century of madness and isolation. A workshop, tables covered with tools and instruments, shelves lined with journals, hundreds of them, each carefully labeled with dates going back to 1969. A generator humming in the corner, connected to a web of wires and cables, and on the walls, photographs. Dozens of them. Hundreds. All the faces of Silas's victims, a gallery of the lost and the broken spanning 5 decades. Devon's flashlight found his father's face among them. Michael Brennan, looking terrified, bound to a chair in what appeared to be an interrogation. His mother, younger, before her mind had shattered, staring at the camera with eyes full of hatred and fear. Emma, just 12 years old, curled in a corner of a cell, and Tyler, his little brother, crying, reaching toward the camera as if begging for mercy. "Oh God," Devin whispered. "He documented everything, every victim, every torture, every—" "This is evidence," Detective Harris said, her voice tight with controlled rage. "We photograph everything, but we don't touch anything yet. This is going to be the case that finally puts him away for—" The lights came on. Not the harsh white of fluorescence, but a dim reddish glow from fixtures around the room's perimeter. And from speakers Devin hadn't noticed, Silas's voice filled the chamber. "Welcome to my sanctum, my inner sanctuary. I'm pleased you've made it this far. Not many do. The FBI, of course, is still debating protocols at the base of the mountain, as predictable as ever. But you, Ranger Hutchins, and you, Detective Harris, you have initiative. I appreciate that." "Where are you, Garrett?" Detective Harris called out, sweeping her weapon around the room. "Everywhere and nowhere," Silas's voice replied. "These passages are mine. I know every inch, every shadow. You're standing in one of 6 workshops scattered throughout the complex. But I am in none of them." Devin noticed something the others missed. The voice wasn't coming from speakers. It was coming from a radio on one of the workbenches, a walkie-talkie with its transmit light glowing. He grabbed it before anyone could stop him. "This is Devin Brennan. I want to talk to you." There was a pause. Then Silas's voice came through the radio, sounding amused. "Ah, young Devin. All grown up now. I remember you from your father's wallet, the family pictures he carried. You were supposed to be there that October day, weren't you? The whole family together. But you chose a party over family time. Tell me, does the guilt ever fade?" "You don't get to talk about my choices," Devin said, his voice steady despite the rage building inside him. "You're a monster who's been preying on innocent people for 50 years. But it's over now. We found your victims. We found your lair. And we're going to make sure you spend whatever's left of your miserable life in a cage." Bold words, but you're wrong about one thing. This isn't over. In fact, it's just beginning. There was a clicking sound through the radio. "You see, I've always had a contingency plan. If my sanctuary was ever truly compromised, I would rather see it destroyed than let it fall into the hands of those who wouldn't understand my work." A rumbling sound began, distant but growing closer. The walls began to vibrate. "He's collapsing the tunnels," Hutchins said, his eyes widening. "Everyone out, now." They ran back the way they'd come, the rumbling growing louder. Dust began to rain from the ceiling, and cracks appeared in the walls. Behind them, they heard the crash of the workshop collapsing, tons of earth and stone reclaiming the space Silas had carved from the mountain. They reached the shaft and scrambled up the ladder, the rungs shaking beneath their hands. Torres and the other rangers grabbed them at the top, hauling them out of the shaft just as it collapsed with a roar that shook the entire forest. They lay on the ground, gasping for breath, as the earth continued to rumble beneath them. In the distance, they could hear other collapses, other sections of Silas's underground kingdom destroying themselves. "The others," Devin gasped. "The people still down there, the helpers, anyone who didn't escape." "They're gone," Detective Harris said quietly. "All of them. He killed them all rather than let us save them." The rumbling finally stopped, leaving an eerie silence broken only by their labored breathing. Devin sat up, looking at the collapsed shaft. Somewhere beneath tons of earth and shattered stone was the evidence of Silas Garrett's crimes, his journals, his photographs, his victims, and Silas himself, if he hadn't found a way to escape. "We need to secure the other known entrances," Hutchins said, pulling out his radio. "If he's still alive, he'll try to get out somewhere." They spread out, moving to the cabin site and the sinkhole. Both had collapsed, leaving nothing but sinkholes and rubble. The FBI teams were converging on the area now, their helicopters circling overhead, but they were too late. As night fell over Massanutten Mountain, Devon stood at the edge of the collapsed cabin site, looking at the depression in the earth where Silas's main entrance had been. Was the monster still alive down there, trapped in the darkness he'd created? Or had he found a way out, another hidden exit that no one knew about? The answer would come soon enough. But for now, Devon had something more important to do. His mother and sister were waiting at the hospital, and for the first time in 25 years, he could tell them they were truly safe. Or at least, he hoped that was true. The University of Virginia Medical Center's psychiatric wing was quiet at 3 a.m. Devon sat in the waiting area outside his mother's room, a cup of cold coffee forgotten in his hand. He'd been there for 6 hours, waiting for the doctors to finish their initial evaluations, waiting for permission to see her. Emma was 2 floors up in intensive care, being treated for severe malnutrition and dehydration. The doctors had been cautiously optimistic about her physical recovery, but the psychological damage was another matter entirely. They'd sedated her when she'd woken screaming, convinced that Silas was in the room with her. "Mr. Brennan!" Devon looked up to see Dr. Rachel Morrison approaching. She was the lead psychiatrist assigned to his mother's case, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes that had seen too much human suffering. "How is she?" Devon asked, standing. "Physically, she's stable, malnourished, dehydrated, some chronic health issues from years of inadequate care, but nothing immediately life-threatening." Dr. Morrison gestured to the chairs, and they both sat. Mentally, however, the situation is more complex. Emma said her mind broke, that she doesn't recognize people anymore. Your mother is suffering from what we call dissociative amnesia combined with severe PTSD and possible psychosis. The trauma she endured was so profound that her mind essentially created a wall between her current self and her past. She doesn't remember being Sarah Brennan. She doesn't remember you, or Emma, or her husband. Those memories are locked behind a protective barrier her psyche built to survive. Devon felt his throat tighten. Will she ever remember? It's impossible to say. Sometimes with therapy and time, patients can recover lost memories. But sometimes the wall remains permanent. Her mind may have decided that forgetting was the only way to survive, and forcing those memories back could cause more harm than good. "Can I see her?" Dr. Morrison hesitated. "You can, but I need to prepare you. She may not know who you are. She may become agitated or frightened. We have her on medication to keep her calm, but she's still very fragile." Devon nodded. "I understand." The doctor led him down a quiet hallway to a private room. Inside, Sarah Brennan sat in a chair by the window, staring out at the darkness. She'd been cleaned and dressed in hospital clothes, her white hair brushed and pulled back. She looked better than she had in the shelter, but there was still that terrible emptiness in her eyes. "Sarah," Dr. Morrison said gently, "you have a visitor. This is Devon. He's your son." Sarah turned her head slowly, studying Devon with the distant curiosity of someone looking at a stranger. "Son," she repeated, as if testing the word. "Hi, Mom," Devon said, his voice catching. He pulled up a chair and sat across from her, keeping some distance so as not to overwhelm her. "I don't know if you remember me, but—" "The shepherd said I never had children," Sarah interrupted, her voice flat. "He said I was always alone. Always his." "He lied to you, Mom. You had 3 children. Me, Emma, and Tyler. You were married to Dad, to Michael. You had a whole life before." Devon stopped, seeing the confusion and fear growing in her eyes. Dr. Morrison touched his shoulder. "Slower, Mr. Brennan. Too much information too quickly can be distressing." Devon took a breath and tried again. "My name is Devon. I'm here to help you. You're safe now." Sarah looked back out the window. "Safe," she murmured. "No one is safe. The shepherd sees everything. He knows when we try to leave. He always brings us back." "He can't bring you back," Devon said firmly. "He's gone. The mountain collapsed. He's buried under tons of rock. But Sarah just shook her head, a small smile on her lips that was worse than any expression of fear. He'll come back. He always comes back. He's been coming back for 50 years. A chill ran down Devon's spine. What do you mean? The others, Sarah said, her voice taking on a sing-song quality. The ones from before. They tried to escape too. They thought they were free, but he always found them, always brought them back. That's why there's no point in running, no point in hoping. Better to be broken, easier that way. Dr. Morrison intervened. Sarah, why don't we talk about something else? Would you like some water? Are you hungry? But Sarah had retreated back into herself, humming that tuneless melody Devon had heard in the shelter. The conversation was over. Outside the room, Dr. Morrison spoke quietly. This is going to be a long process, Mr. Brennan. Years, probably. And there's no guarantee of full recovery. I'm sorry. Devon left the hospital as dawn was breaking over Charlottesville, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. The beauty of it felt obscene after the darkness of his mother's room. He drove back to Roanoke in a daze, his mind trying to process everything that had happened in the past week. His phone rang as he pulled into his driveway. Detective Harris. Mr. Brennan, we've found something. Can you come back to the mountain? What is it? I'd rather show you in person, but I think you need to see this. 2 hours later, Devon was standing at a new excavation site on the eastern slope of Massanutten. The FBI had brought in ground-penetrating radar and were systematically mapping the collapsed tunnel system. They'd found something that morning, and a team was carefully digging down to it. We located what appears to be a chamber that didn't fully collapse, Detective Harris explained as they walked toward the dig site. The radar shows it's still intact, about 30 feet down, and there's a heat signature. A heat signature? You mean, we don't know what it means. Could be trapped air, could be equipment still running, could be someone alive down there. They reached the edge of the excavation. Workers had dug a shaft down through the collapsed debris, shoring it up with timber as they went. At the bottom, Devon could see the dark opening of a passage. We're sending a team down with cameras, Detective Harris said. The FBI wants to go in fully armed in case Silas is still alive, Devon finished. They watched as 3 FBI agents in tactical gear descended into the shaft, their camera feeds displayed on monitors set up nearby. The passage they entered was partially collapsed, but passable. The team moved slowly, checking for structural instability as they went. After about 50 feet, the passage opened into a chamber. The camera feeds showed a space about 20 feet across, with a cot in one corner and shelves lined with supplies. Enough food and water to last one person several months. A generator, still running, providing heat and light. And on the wall, a map with multiple routes marked, leading away from the chamber in different directions. But no Silas. He's not here, one of the agents reported over the radio. But he was. Recently. The cot is still warm. Check for exits, the FBI team leader ordered. The agents searched the chamber and found what they were looking for, a narrow passage at the back, carefully concealed behind a false wall. The passage sloped upward, heading toward the surface. He got out, Detective Harris said, her voice tight with frustration. The bastard had an escape route we didn't know about. They brought dogs to the exit point when the agents finally traced it to the surface. It emerged nearly 2 miles from the primary collapse site, hidden in dense forest. The dogs picked up a scent and followed it to a Forest Service road where the trail went cold. He had a vehicle stashed, Ranger Hutchins said, examining tire tracks in the soft earth. Probably had it here for years, just in case. He's gone. A manhunt was launched immediately. Silas Garrett's photograph, digitally aged from pictures taken in the 1960s, was distributed to every law enforcement agency in Virginia and the surrounding states. His description was broadcast on news channels, with warnings that he was extremely dangerous and likely to approach hikers or campers with offers of help. But Devon knew, looking at those tire tracks disappearing into the distance, that finding Silas wouldn't be easy. The man had evaded capture for over 50 years. He knew how to disappear, how to blend in, how to find new hunting grounds. 3 days later, Devon was back at the hospital when Emma finally woke without sedation. She was still weak, her body recovering from decades of malnutrition, but her eyes were clearer than they'd been. "Devon," she said when she saw him. Her voice was hoarse, but stronger. "Mom. Did you find Mom?" "I found her," Devon said, pulling a chair close to her bed. "She's here, 2 floors down. The doctors are taking care of her." "Is she—" Emma couldn't finish the question. "Her mind is still broken. She doesn't remember us. But she's alive, and she's safe, and maybe that's enough for now." Emma closed her eyes, tears leaking from beneath her lids. "I tried to take care of her, down there in the darkness. I tried to keep her mind together, told her stories about you, about our old life. But the shepherd, Her voice broke. "He did things to her, to all of us. Things I can't even—" "You don't have to talk about it," Devon said quickly. "Not now, not until you're ready." But Emma shook her head. "I need to tell someone. Need to get it out before it poisons me from the inside." She opened her eyes, meeting his gaze. "Devon, there were others. Not just the helpers we saw. There are more, out there, living normal lives. The shepherd let some of them go, the ones who were completely broken, who he knew would never tell because they were too ashamed, too traumatized. He called it his diaspora. Seeds planted in the world, waiting." Devon felt ice form in his chest. "How many?" "I don't know. He never told me exact numbers. But over 50 years. Dozens, maybe. All of them carrying his poison, his methods. All of them knowing that if they ever spoke, he would find them." "They'll speak now," Devon said. "With him on the run, with the story public, they'll come forward." "Will they?" Emma's voice was bitter. "Would you, if you'd spent years being tortured, broken, reformed into something inhuman, then released back into the world with the knowledge that the monster who did it to you was still out there, watching? Or would you try to forget, try to bury it so deep that even you couldn't find it anymore?" Devon had no answer for that. Over the next week, as Emma grew stronger, she worked with FBI profilers to create a comprehensive map of what she'd learned about Silas's operation. The number of chambers in the underground complex, the names of other victims she'd heard about, the patterns of his hunting, his selection process. And she confirmed what Devon had feared. Silas Garrett wasn't just one man. He was a philosophy, a method, a disease, and he'd been spreading it for half a century. The FBI found evidence of at least 23 other victims dating back to 1969. Some of the remains recovered from the collapsed tunnels were identified through dental records or DNA. Others remained nameless, their identities lost to time. Patricia Vance's body was found in one of the collapsed chambers. She'd been trying to escape when the ceiling came down, crushing her. After 50 years of captivity, she'd died just meters from freedom. The discovery made national news. The case of Silas Garrett became a sensation, the kind of story that haunted people's nightmares. The mountain cannibal, some tabloids called him, though there was no evidence of cannibalism. The shepherd of souls, others named him, referencing his own twisted terminology. But to Devon, he was just the man who had stolen 25 years from his family, the man who had murdered his father and brother, broken his mother's mind, and left his sister with scars that would never fully heal. And somewhere out there, Silas Garrett was still free, still hunting, still adding to his flock. 6 months after the collapse of Massanutten Mountain, Devon stood in the parking lot of a rehabilitation center in Richmond, watching the autumn leaves fall. It was October again, the anniversary of his family's disappearance, now marked by their recovery rather than their loss. But the weight of it still pressed on him, heavier than ever. Inside the facility, Emma was making slow progress. The therapists said she was responding well to treatment, learning to live with her trauma rather than be consumed by it. She'd started painting, creating disturbing but powerful images of her time underground that the art therapist said were helping her process the experience. Sarah was in a different facility, one specializing in severe dissociative disorders. She still didn't remember her life before captivity. Some days she seemed content, painting or reading in her room. Other days she would stand at the window for hours, humming that tuneless melody, waiting for the shepherd to return. Devon visited them both as often as he could, though the drives were long and the visits were often painful. But they were his family, and he wouldn't abandon them. His phone buzzed with a text from Detective Harris. "Call me when you can. News about the case." Devon called immediately. "Did you find him?" "No," Detective Harris said, and Devon could hear the frustration in her voice. "But we found something almost as important. We've identified 3 people who we believe were former victims, released back into society. 2 of them have agreed to speak with us. That's good, isn't it? It's progress. But Devon, what they're telling us..." She paused. Silas didn't just torture people for his own gratification. He was training them, teaching them his methods. Some of the ones he released, he sent out with a purpose. Devon's blood ran cold. What purpose? We're still piecing it together, but it looks like he was trying to create a network. Other hunters working independently but following his philosophy. The FBI is calling it a potential cult structure, decentralized and nearly impossible to track. How many? We don't know. The victims who are talking say Silas mentioned at least a dozen protégés over the years. Most didn't survive his training, but some did, and when they proved worthy, he released them to start their own flocks. Devon leaned against his car, feeling sick. So even if we find him, there are others out there continuing his work. That's the theory, and it gets worse. We've been comparing missing persons cases in Virginia and surrounding states over the past 30 years. There are patterns that match Silas's methods: experienced hikers vanishing in wilderness areas, families disappearing from campgrounds, no bodies ever found. We've identified at least 6 clusters of disappearances that could be connected to others using his techniques. Jesus Christ. We're putting together a task force, FBI, state police, park services from multiple states. This is going to be a long investigation. Detective Harris's voice softened. "I wanted you to hear it from me first, before it hits the news. This isn't over, Devon. Finding your family, collapsing the mountain, those were victories. But the war against what Silas created is just beginning." After the call ended, Devon sat in his car for a long time, watching the leaves fall. He thought about his father, murdered in a motel bathroom because he'd tried to help strangers. He thought about Tyler, too young to survive the horror. He thought about Emma, slowly learning to be human again after 25 years of being prey. And his mother, lost somewhere in the protective fog her mind had created. And he thought about all the others out there, the ones still trapped in other underground labyrinths, calling out for rescue that might never come. His phone rang again. This time it was Emma. "Devon, can you come in? I need to tell you something." 20 minutes later, he was sitting in Emma's private room at the rehabilitation center. She'd been painting, and her latest work was propped on an easel by the window. A forest scene with dark figures hidden among the trees, barely visible, but unmistakably there. "I've been remembering things," Emma said, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "Things the shepherd told me over the years. Things I tried to forget because they were too awful, too hopeless. But the doctors say I need to face them, process them." "You don't have to tell me if you're not ready," Devon said. "I do. Because it's important." She took a shaky breath. The shepherd used to talk about his philosophy, about what he'd learned from his years in the psychiatric hospital before he escaped. He said humans were sheep, pretending to be people. That civilization was just a thin veneer over our true nature. And his purpose was to strip away that veneer, reveal what we really were underneath. He was insane, Emma, Don't let his poison— Let me finish, Emma interrupted. He said that most people couldn't handle the truth, that they broke when faced with their real nature. But some, a rare few, they embraced it. They saw the world as he did. And those were the ones he trained. The protégés Detective Harris mentioned. Emma nodded. He told me about them sometimes when he was feeling particularly proud of his work. He called them his apostles, said they were spreading across the country, each finding their own sanctuary, their own flock, building a network of shadows beneath the world. Did he tell you their names, locations, anything that could help us find them? No, he was careful about that, but— Emma reached into her pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. I've been drawing, not just paintings, but diagrams, maps, things I remember from the underground complex. Symbols the shepherd had carved in certain chambers. The doctors thought it was just therapy, helping me externalize the memories. But I think these symbols meant something. I think they were messages to his protégés, instructions for those who knew how to read them. She unfolded the paper, revealing a series of intricate marks, circles, lines, geometric patterns that looked almost like a language. I saw these symbols repeated in different chambers, Emma explained. Always in groups of 3. I think they were coordinates or codes or I don't know exactly. But they felt important. The shepherd would spend hours studying them, touching them, whispering to them like they were alive. Devin photographed the symbols with his phone. I'll get these to Detective Harris. If there's any chance they can help. There's something else, Emma said, her voice dropping to a whisper. The night before the collapse, when you and the detective found me, the shepherd came to my chamber. He knew something was wrong, that the mountain was about to give up its secrets, and he said something I didn't understand at the time. What did he say? He said, "The sanctuary may fall, but the shepherd's work continues. My children are already in place, waiting for the signal. When I fall silent, they will know it's time to step into the light." Emma's eyes filled with tears. Devin, I think the collapse was his signal. I think he wanted to be discovered, wanted the story to go public. Because now his protégés know he's gone underground, and they're activating whatever plan he set in motion. Devin felt a chill despite the warmth of the room. We need to tell the FBI if there's going to be some kind of coordinated action. They won't believe me, Emma said bitterly. I'm the traumatized victim, unreliable, possibly delusional. They'll nod and smile and add it to the file, but they won't act on it until something terrible happens. She was probably right. Devin had seen how the authorities treated Emma's more extreme statements, the kindly skepticism that dismissed anything that sounded too much like a conspiracy theory. Then we make them listen, Devin said. We give them evidence they can't ignore. Over the next 3 months, Devin became obsessed. He left his job, telling them he needed time to deal with family matters. He spent his days researching missing persons cases, cross-referencing locations and methods, looking for patterns that matched what Emma had described. And he found them. In the Adirondacks of New York, a cluster of disappearances over 15 years, all experienced hikers vanishing in a relatively small area. In the Ozarks of Arkansas, families camping in remote areas, never seen again, their vehicles found abandoned with no signs of struggle. In the Pacific Northwest, solo backpackers disappearing along the Appalachian Trail's western counterparts, their belongings sometimes found scattered, sometimes vanishing completely. Each cluster centered around wilderness areas with extensive cave systems or old mine networks. Each showed the same pattern: victims taken from isolated locations, no bodies ever recovered, investigations that eventually went cold. Devin compiled his research into a comprehensive database, adding Emma's symbols and her testimony about the protégés. He sent it to Detective Harris, to the FBI task force, to journalists who specialized in unsolved cases. Most ignored him. Some were polite in their dismissals, thanking him for his effort, but explaining that correlation wasn't causation, that missing persons cases in wilderness areas were sadly common and not necessarily connected. But a few listened. A reporter from the Washington Post contacted him, interested in doing a follow-up story on the Massanutten case. Devin shared his research, and the reporter began investigating, interviewing other families of missing hikers, comparing notes with law enforcement in different states. 3 weeks later, the story ran on the front page. The Shepherd's Network is a cult of serial killers operating in America's wilderness. The article was careful, well-researched, presenting Devin's findings alongside expert skepticism and official responses. But it raised questions that couldn't be easily dismissed, and it put pressure on law enforcement to take the possibility seriously. The FBI announced an expansion of their task force, bringing in agents from multiple field offices to coordinate investigation of suspicious disappearances in wilderness areas across the country. And then, 2 months after the article ran, the first break came. A woman in Colorado came forward, claiming she'd been held captive in an underground chamber for 3 years before being released in 2018. She'd never spoken about it before, too ashamed and terrified, but reading about Emma's story had given her courage. Her description of her captivity matched Emma's in disturbing detail. The same methods, the same philosophy, even some of the same symbols carved in the walls, but different location, different captor. She helped police locate the site. They found an abandoned mine shaft that had been expanded into a small complex of chambers. It had been empty for years, deliberately collapsed to hide evidence, but forensics found DNA from at least 7 individuals. One of them was Melissa Kramer, the teenage girl who had disappeared from a church camping trip in 1991. She'd been in Silas's original complex, but her DNA here suggested she'd been moved or that there had been contact between sites. The investigation expanded. More victims came forward, encouraged by the growing public awareness. Each one added pieces to the puzzle, confirming that Silas Garrett had indeed built a network, training others in his methods and releasing them to establish their own hunting grounds. Devin watched the news coverage from his apartment in Roanoke, feeling a complex mixture of vindication and horror. He'd been right, but being right meant accepting that the problem was far larger, far more entrenched than anyone had imagined. His phone rang. Detective Harris. "We found him," she said without preamble. "Silas Garrett. Or at least we found a body we believe is his." Devin's heart raced. "Where?" "Montana. A hiker found remains in a remote area of Glacier National Park. The body had been there for several months, partially consumed by wildlife, but dental records are a match." "How did he die?" "We're not certain. There was a bullet wound to the chest, but whether it was self-inflicted or whether someone else..." She paused. "There was a note with the body, in a waterproof case. It was addressed to Emma." Devin felt his blood run cold. "What did it say?" "I can't tell you that. It's evidence. But I can tell you that Emma has a right to see it if she chooses. We're leaving that decision up to her and her doctors." Devin called Emma immediately. She listened quietly as he explained, then asked him to come to the facility. When he arrived, she was in her room with Dr. Morrison and Detective Harris. The note lay on the table between them, still in its evidence bag. "I want Devin to read it to me," Emma said. I can't look at his handwriting, but I need to know what it says." Detective Harris nodded and handed the bag to Devin. He pulled out the note with shaking hands. The handwriting was precise, elegant, the hand of an educated man. He began to read. "My dearest Emma, my finest student, my greatest achievement. If you are reading this, then I have passed beyond your reach, beyond anyone's reach. You may think this is an ending, but you know better. I taught you well. You survived when others broke. You adapted when others died. You became strong in the darkness, resilient in the face of impossible horror. That strength is my gift to you, my legacy. The work continues, as you well know. My children carry the flame, tending their flocks as I tended mine. The authorities will find some of them, perhaps even most, but they will never find all. The shepherd's work is eternal, passed from teacher to student, generation to generation. I took your family from you, Emma. I won't apologize for that. It would be insincere, and you deserve better than lies. But know that in taking them, I gave you something far more valuable. The knowledge of what humans truly are beneath the civilized veneer. You have seen into the abyss, and the abyss has seen into you. You can never go back to being the innocent child who went hiking with her family that October day. That girl is dead, has been dead for 25 years. But you survived her death and became something new, something stronger. Use that strength, Emma. Whether to fight against my legacy or to embrace it, the choice is yours. But know that you are forever marked by our time together. Forever my student, forever my finest work. With respect and admiration, Silas Garrett, the shepherd. Silence filled the room when Devon finished reading. Emma sat motionless, tears streaming down her face. "Burn it," she finally said. "I don't want to see it, don't want to touch it. Just burn it and scatter the ashes." "Emma," Dr. Morrison started. "He's still trying to control me, even in death," Emma said, her voice shaking. "Still trying to make me believe his poison, his twisted philosophy. But I won't. I survived him. I survived the darkness. And I'll spend the rest of my life helping make sure his children are found and stopped." She looked at Devon, her eyes fierce despite the tears. "We're not done. This isn't over, but we're going to win, because we have something he never understood." "What's that?" Devon asked. "Hope," Emma said, "and the strength that comes from people who refuse to be broken." 2 years later, Devon stood on a hillside in Shenandoah National Park, watching as workers put the finishing touches on a memorial. The granite monument bore the names of all the victims of Silas Garrett who had been identified. 23 people spanning 5 decades. At the top, in larger letters, "In memory of those lost to darkness, may they find light at last." Emma stood beside him, stronger now, healthier, though the shadows would never fully leave her eyes. She'd become an advocate for missing persons' families and a consultant to the FBI's task force investigating wilderness disappearances. Her insights had helped them locate 3 more hidden sites and identify 17 additional victims. Their mother was not at the ceremony. Sarah Brennan remained in the care facility, still lost in the protective fog of her broken mind. But some days, when Devon visited, she would smile at him as if recognizing something familiar, even if she couldn't place exactly what. It was enough. The investigation into Silas's network had yielded results, though not as many as they'd hoped. 4 individuals had been arrested and charged with kidnapping and murder, their underground sanctuaries discovered and dismantled. 2 had died before they could be captured, one by suicide, one killed in a confrontation with police. But the FBI estimated there were still others out there, hidden, waiting, tending their flocks in secret places beneath the earth. Detective Harris approached, her hair grayer now but her determination undiminished. She'd been promoted to head the federal task force and had made it her life's mission to dismantle what Silas had built. "The ceremony's about to start," she said. They gathered with the other families, parents, siblings, children of the lost, as a chaplain spoke about memory and healing, about hope in the face of unimaginable darkness. Devon only half listened. His attention was drawn to the forest beyond the memorial, the dark trees that seemed to hold secrets in their shadows. Somewhere out there, in caves and mines and hidden chambers, people were still waiting to be found, still hoping for rescue, still fighting to survive. The work would continue. The search would go on. Because even though Silas Garrett was dead, even though some of his protégés had been captured, the darkness he'd spread had not been fully driven back, but neither had the light been extinguished. As the ceremony concluded and people began to disperse, Emma took Devon's hand. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for never giving up, for finding us, for believing we were still out there. "I'll never stop," Devon promised. "As long as there's one person still missing, one person waiting in the dark, I'll keep searching." They walked together down the hillside, leaving the memorial behind, but Devon looked back once, his eyes tracing the names carved in granite. His father, Michael, his brother, Tyler, and all the others who had suffered at the hands of a monster. The mountain had given up some of its secrets, but Devon knew it held more, buried deep in the earth, waiting, and he would be there when they finally came to light. High above, a hawk circled in the clear October sky, its cry echoing across the valley. The sound was lonely and beautiful, a reminder that even in the darkest places, life persisted. Hope endured. And somewhere, in a forest not yet searched, in a cave not yet discovered, someone heard that hawk's cry and held on to the belief that rescue would come. That belief would have to be enough, for now.